And joining us now, Republican Senator from Florida, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Marco Rubio. Senator, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So what is your assessment of what's happening in Ukraine? The German foreign minister warned citizens to leave the eastern part of that country, saying a military confrontation is just a few steps away. What's going to happen?
Well, a couple things are already happening. First of all, the Russians are continuing to try to establish a unified political arm of pro-Russian elements within eastern Ukraine. You're seeing that evidence of, in addition to that, they've called for this May 11th illegal referendum on separating from Ukraine and declaring independence, which is the same model they followed in Crimea. And in fact, you see all-out efforts by the Russians to control the entities and the institutions that would carry out those elections. So I think the likeliest outcome, and I hope that I'm wrong, is a replay of what happened in Crimea, which is that they would have this vote on Sunday or some time thereafter, and then the Russians would claim that it's the pro-Russian elements within eastern Ukraine that are asking to be annexed, and unfortunately then they would move to do the same thing they did in Crimea. So I think right now that's where we're headed, and if you look at some of the rhetoric coming out of Moscow, they're starting to use this term called New Russia, which is really a 19th century term for eastern Ukraine, so it's very troubling.
Right. You wrote an op-ed today calling for more aggressive sanctions right now. But you see these guys, you know, in their four-door sedans with their machine guns and their ski goggles. Will sanctions really have any effect on this sort of war by proxy?
Well, I have called for more sanctions. The op-ed today was about encouraging Ukraine to set up a currency board because their currency has devalued by almost 38%. And so one of the things that Ukraine needs to do in order to establish independence and sovereignty is to get that currency stabilized. And so I've called on the U.S. to encourage them to set up a currency board to be able to accomplish that. As far as the sanctions are concerned, look, I think the dispute with the administration, and you saw that a little bit today in the hearing we had here in Washington, is the administration kind of wants to wait to impose these sanctions if Russia does anything further with regards to eastern Ukraine. In my mind, I think we already know what's going to happen here, and I think the sanctions ahead of time would clearly influence the cost-benefit analysis. That's where I think it would matter. Right now, Vladimir Putin has concluded that the benefits of doing what he's doing outweigh the costs. We have to change that calculus.
But I've heard some people across the aisle, also on your committee, say if you spend too much on sanctions now, Putin will think, well, I got nothing left to lose. We might as well roll those tanks across the border. Do you worry that too much intervention right now might antagonize things?
No, first of all, I don't think he needs any further antagonizing. I don't think this has anything to do with being antagonistic. I think Putin has concluded that he wants Russia to be a great power, and in his mind, that means the ability to have control over all the countries that neighbor him, particularly those countries that were once part of the Soviet Union. And as far as waiting for those sanctions to be imposed, I actually think they're more effective if they're done ahead of time. It clearly sends a message to the people around him and the people in Russia that there are significant consequences for this sort of foreign adventurism that Putin has taken them on.
I'd like to ask you about another topic. Big report today out of the White House, this climate change report the president put forward. 300 scientists saying this is not a future threat. It's happening right now. In fact, here's President Obama this afternoon.
This is not some distant problem of the future. This is a problem that is affecting Americans right now, whether it means increased flooding, greater vulnerability to drought, more severe wildfires. All these things are having an impact on Americans as we speak.
Do you agree with that urgency?
You know, listen, I think severe weather has been a fact of life on Earth since man started recording history. I understand that there's a vast consensus of scientists that are saying that human activity is what's contributing to changes in our climate. I think it's an enormous stretch to say that every weather incident that we now read about or the majority of them are attributable to human activity. But here's what we need to deduce as policymakers, because that's what the president is. He's not a meteorologist. And here's what the president needs to be focused on, and that is he's proposing a certain set of policies that he would have to admit, if questioned, will do nothing. If in fact these scientists are right and it's greenhouse gas emissions that are changing our climate, none of the things he's proposing would do anything to change that whatsoever, but it would have a devastating impact on our economy. We both desire at the end of the day to have more efficient fuels that are domestically produced and cost less money.
Senator Rubio, appreciate your insight tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.